Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen on air or online at iHeart, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, and on our own WHPC app. Download it today so you can get all of the shows from this award-winning radio station. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest Gala Gorman, and she is a licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, and the author of several books, including her latest book, What's Your Kryptonite? Also, she talks about managing the toxic stressors threatening your superwoman status. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Gorman.
Thank you so much for having me, Ellen. Great to be here.
Let's go back in time and talk about what made you interested in becoming a licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, and natural healthcare professional.
My journey started many years ago, back in my 20s, I suppose, when I had experienced kind of chronic health issues. I had chronic bronchitis when I was very young and was on antibiotics pretty much nonstop. And if I would get some sort of cold, which happened regularly because my immune system was not very strong, I would get really sick and get just a scary sounding cough. And so I had some contact with people in the health profession. And as a CPA, I was a CPA in my former life. So as a CPA, I consulted to physicians, and one of those doctors was a chiropractor and also a friend. And she said, next time you get sick, you might want to try going a more natural route so that your immune system can develop its own antibodies essentially to this so that you won't get so sick every time. And so I poked at that a little bit and was intrigued. And, we put together a natural protocol so that I was prepared. And so next time I got sick, I was like, okay, I'm really going to give this a try. And so I was like really sick for a couple of weeks. But after that, I have literally never had to take antibiotics for any sort of cold or flu again. And if I get sick, I may get sick. It rarely happens. I'll go years without getting sick. But if I get sick, it pretty much passes quickly. And I almost enjoy the process of noticing how my immune system is reacting to whatever antigen or pathogen that it's trying to fight off. And so long story short, I, got really intrigued by this process, saw more and more how the kind of Band-Aid approach to medicine and healthcare was not appealing. And then just, over the years evolved into looking for a more structured approach. And the nice thing about Oriental medicine is that it really not only addresses the physical issues that we see, the symptoms, but it also addresses the energetic imbalances that are going on internally. The symptoms are just the outworking of the internal imbalances.
Yeah, it's an amazing system when we look at the ancient, let's say, traditional medicine. Traditional medicine are systems that have been used with great success and very low side effects for thousands of years. And that would include traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Native American medicine, Western herbal medicine. There are many different paths you can follow, but all of them always honor the whole self, which is sort of directly opposite to what we see in what I call mainstream medicine, also called conventional medicine, where all you really do is not heal, not look at the whole picture, strictly suppress symptoms.
Yeah, it's kind of uncanny, right? I really encourage my patients to avoid suppressing symptoms at all costs. When you suppress symptoms, you basically drive the toxicity, whatever is causing the symptom, further into the body. And ultimately, it ends up creating more of what I refer to as noise, which makes it harder to hear those subtle messages that your body's trying to give you that point to what really is going on and what really needs to be addressed, the root cause.
Well, one thing I'd love to point out to our listeners is you have a really beautiful website, and you can find it at drgala.com. That's drgala.com. And there you really, I think a lot of people, and it is certainly woman focused, right? So
yeah,
we invite our men to also look, but your particular practice is very woman focused, because you're talking about helping the superwoman detox the effects of chronic stress. Now, those are huge. So what would you consider a superwoman?
So most women, just almost tongue in cheek, would refer to themselves as superwoman in their world if they were not overachieving and managing to keep all the balls in the air and fight off everything that's coming at them on a day-to-day basis. Their world would not continue to exist. They have a lot of what I refer to as stakeholders, people in their world that really rely on them to maintain their superwoman status. And so when you're focused on taking care of everybody and you tend to get the short end of the stick yourself, that is a superwoman. You know, that's a person who is, trying to right all the wrongs in the world and kind of minimizes taking care of herself first, which is critically important. You don't have anything really to give the world unless you take care of yourself first.
That is really true. Now, with all that we've gone through in the world in the last few years, how do you think that has affected this teaching of yours? I think it's probably more appropriate than ever.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I don't know that what's going on now in the world has made this any more critical. I think maybe people are a little more aware of their health and how their health is so tied to their overall well-being and their ability to really enjoy their life. I think it's in the last few years, we've seen story after story after story of lives cut short or people dealing with, debilitating side effects from different sort of health crisis. So maybe it's a little more front of mind, top of mind, but this has been going on for decades now. And so this is not a new issue. It's just, for me personally, having lost people that were really important to me, to cancer and other diseases that are really just an escalation of dis-ease that escalates to disease. And disease is a byproduct of chronic and toxic stress.
It is. Now, they talk a lot about that in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and other symptoms, but it seems Western medicine, they say they ignore it, but in many of the books I've written, we have a massive amount of clinical studies, well documented from mainstream Western literature, showing the specific effects of both stress and toxicity.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I agree with you. The information's there. It's not that the information's not there. It's that the system is designed to compensate certain things that are not focused on lifestyle modification. They're focused on just sort of getting you back out there to continue what you were doing before you came in. And so it's clear there has been a lot of research that stress is life-threatening. That's, the way I refer to it. But in order to figure out what is actually causing your stress, sure, there are these sort of escalating, what I call garden variety stressors, meaning just the sort of things you would naturally see as stress. There are also other stressors like bacterial buildup, viral buildup, food-related toxicity. There's emotional toxicity, the results of trauma. Bessel van der Kolk talks about how the body stores trauma, and that basically is a constant low-grade stressor that then essentially when we're under stress, our immune system is taken offline and our body diverts energy to be able to manage the stress. And when we're already kind of burning the candle at both ends, we don't have any more energy to divert. And that's when things start to go awry.
Yes, that's a good explanation of it. And I want our Herbally Yours listeners to know that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. We always bring you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And our guest today is Gala Gorman. You can find her at DRGALA. drgala.com. And remember, on our archives, we always have live links so that you can easily find all our guests. And Dr. Gala, you wrote a book called What's Your Kryptonite? What is that book about? So
I was chatting with somebody about the book and what I intended to cover, and we were kind of brainstorming on titles, and I stumbled onto this, superwoman concept and the kryptonite that is in our world that most of us don't even know is there. If you think about Superman or Superwoman, oftentimes they don't come into close contact with kryptonite with it sitting out in, broad daylight. They just notice that their superpowers are being drained and something's not right. And so at that point, then they suspect it's kryptonite because they know that's what drains their superpowers. But now they've got to go start investigating to figure out what the problem is. And so it's such a great metaphor for how kryptonite shows up in our world. If it was just really clear that this one certain thing is what's causing the problem, stop doing that. Distance yourself from some substance. If we knew that it was absolutely that one thing, we would do it, right? We'd find an alternative that created the same experience for us, that didn't drain our superpowers. But it's just not that simple. Kryptonite tends to be what I refer to as a tricky toxin, and can take some real investigative work and some help to unravel the mystery. Yeah, that's excellent. So why don't we go into, if someone did do a consult with you, and I imagine you can't do acupuncture online, but you certainly can discuss things, and you can talk about changes people might make to decrease the effect of stress on their life. And you might be able to talk about diet and exercise. Now,
In terms of diet and exercise, everybody knows diet and exercise. Every doctor says that, even though they don't give specific instructions, which would be useful. But what do you think is the best place to start? By changing one's diet or including more exercise? In most cases, more. There are people and clients I've had who are doing way too much exercise.
Yeah. So I don't recommend over-exercising, especially for mature women. We're already suffering from adrenal fatigue and insulin resistance from cortisol dysregulation. And if you're over-exercising, you're only making the problem worse. Movement is definitely helpful. Walking, gentle yoga, stretching. The human body is essentially a rechargeable battery, and that movement helps to keep our battery charged. But I will say that if you were trying to determine what was going to move the needle the most for you, it would not be exercise. It would definitely be diet. And so diet is 80% and exercise is 20%. That assumes that you're not just completely sedentary, sitting on the sofa all day long, for sure. With the diet, you need to identify what I refer to as your kryptonite foods, those foods that you have specific sensitivity to. Again, when you're consuming those foods, it is having essentially an allergic reaction in your body, and then it's creating a stress response. And then you've got this cascade that happens that shuts down your immune system, your digestive system, and then things start to back up.
Well, yeah, you say that, but I know that what you're talking about, sometimes people feel like an allergy would be very easy to spot, like your lips blow up if you eat shellfish. Some people have that, which is an IgE-mediated allergy. It sounds like you're talking about allergies that are mediated by other immunoglobulins that are more subtle. And how would people find out? Like they may say, I don't have any allergies, even though they may be having a subtle reaction to various foods, usually the most common foods that they eat.
Yeah, that's a great point, that people have been conditioned to believe that you've got to see some really severe allergic reaction for it to constitute a food sensitivity. I don't call it an allergy. I call it a sensitivity.
Right. That's a better word because it's much more subtle. Like the allergy is what I was saying, where they know, you just break out in hives immediately after eating shrimp. Right.
Yeah. So for example, a lot of people have a sensitivity to dairy. And the interesting thing with dairy is that it can take up to 3 days in your body for you to fully experience the abnormal reaction from consuming dairy. So a lot of people will eliminate dairy. They will feel better. Skin eruptions will go away. Sinus issues will clear up. Digestion will smooth out. They'll have a lot of positive effects. And they'll think, okay, I'm not sure it was really the dairy, so I'm going to try reintroducing dairy. And so the first day they have a little bit of dairy, no reaction. It's like, oh, well, this couldn't possibly be the dairy, right? I didn't have a reaction. So next day, a little more dairy. Okay, now I'm starting to feel a little something, but I'm not kind of sure what's going on. I'm still not convinced it's the dairy. By the third day, now a lot of the symptoms are back, but it's confusing, right? Because you think, well, it couldn't be directly related to the dairy because I didn't have an immediate reaction. And so that's another kind of misnomer when you're trying to evaluate food sensitivities, that it's not just you ingest something like you mentioned shellfish, for example, and you blow up like a balloon, right? It's not that immediate or extreme. Your body is on a constant state of alert and your immune system is on overdrive trying to manage it.
Right. Now, I know, do you ever use something like a blood test, an IgG mediated test that really can pick up some of these more subtle reactions?
Absolutely. When we know that somebody's really having food sensitivities and we want to get really a clearer picture of exactly what's causing the problem, that makes a lot of sense. So we definitely use those tests. But I will say that the tests are fairly expensive. And so when you're kind of wanting to DIY and get started on your own, just eliminating things like dairy, gluten, yeast, and as much sugar as possible will be a great place to start.
That's true. And sugar is really, I would say, a lot of people's main challenge. And it's so prolific. Even in something like ketchup, there will be sugar if you read your ingredients.
Yeah. And the other caution that I like to give people is I see a lot of chemical toxicity where people come in and they're managing a lot of the other toxins, but their chemical toxicity is really high. And that tends to be people who have replaced sugar with artificial sweeteners. And your body does not know what to do with that. And it will build up chemical toxicity. And so personally, I would rather have you use real sugar, real sweetener, and satisfy that urge, that craving with something, some real substance that your body recognizes, then turn to an artificial sweetener.
Yes, that's a good choice. And how would you say that there might be some supplements that people can consider to offset some of the negative effects of stress?
So I don't really recommend any long-term use of supplements. I use, tools that I use in my practice to evaluate what's really going on with somebody. And then we come up with a protocol that is designed to address the current imbalances. That protocol typically is used for 3 to 6 weeks. And then we take 2 to 3 weeks off and determine whether your body's been able to sort of hold that improvement. Can you go it without supplementation going forward? And so once the dust kind of settles, then we may need to introduce a tweaked a next protocol, if you will. So I don't blanketly recommend any supplementation long term. I just had a patient who texted me this week and said that she was having some issues with allergies. My car was covered with yellow pollen last week. And I'm like, trees, go back to sleep. It's still January, but definitely, allergy season is already getting started. And so she admitted that she had been long-term taking this supplement and hadn't told me about it before. So I hadn't been able to kind of counsel her on how it fit into the other things that we were using. And so she's telling me she's having these side effects because she's increased the dose of this supplement that she's been taking long term. And so I looked it up real quick and I said, this supplement is essentially a diuretic. And so obviously you're having these reactions.
Wait a minute. You and I know what diuretic means.
Okay. So
let's tell our audience what you mean by that.
Yeah. So it's pulling moisture essentially out of your body, right? So she's complaining of dryness and some of these other issues. And I said, this supplement is basically causing the problem. And not only is it causing a problem in this particular instance, but it's also disrupting the progress we're trying to make with the other protocol I've got you on. And so, I don't recommend any supplementation long-term. I really, I'm not a medical doctor. I would never recommend that a patient go against the advice of their physician. But if your prescribing physician has put you on a medication that you have been on long-term, I suggest that you go back to that physician and you ask the physician, do I still need to be on this medication? Is this the best medication for me? Is this the correct dose based on what I've got going on? And then have a frank discussion. Is there a way that I could work towards getting off this medication? It's always going to be best if we're on less medications, less supplements, less things that disrupt our body's natural ability to take care of things. When we supplement or use medication, we create lazy internal processes, is the way I describe it.
Well, that's a good descriptive word, because sometimes over supplementing will shut down the natural ability, or if the body's going to create, let's say, a hormone, DHEA is an example, but you're taking a whole lot of it, then your body gets the message not to make more. So that is really true. It's a balancing act. And luckily, herbs can be very useful as well, but you do need to know how to use them.
Yeah, herbs are very powerful. With herbal medicine that I've been trained to use, we use formulas that have been determined for thousands of years to be effective for specific situations. But, with those herbal medications, they are viewed as medication and not meant to be used long term. They're meant to be used to restore balance to some bodily system or function that needs a little bit of a reboot, jumpstart, a reminder of what it's supposed to be doing.
That's a good way to put it. Well, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. Just remind people, what is the best way to find you?
If you go to my website, drgala.com, drgala.com, you will find an easy link to get your hands on the book at Amazon. And at the bottom, you will also find all my links to the social channels. And so I am on pretty much every social channel, whichever one is most convenient for you. And I just encourage you to reach out. You can sign up for my newsletter there and get some ongoing information and insight that will help you restore your superpowers, maintain your superwoman status.
That's a good way to put it. And thank you so much, Dr. Gala. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in once again to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.